This week at the agenda saw medical centers the size of small cities, sectarian division in Syria, and surprising new methods for individual learning. The agenda's Week in Review begins with a look at the issue of property rights for Canada's First Nations. Christopher Alcantara, can you come on in here and tell us whether you believe if First Nations people, not the band administration, but if the people could own the land underneath the homes in which they live, would that go some distance towards solving some of the problems that John Kay just outlined?
I think it would. Make a big difference for a number of communities because the idea of individual property ownership is about unlocking the economic potential of lands and allowing individuals to become more entrepreneurial. It's not a magic bullet. We've been very clear in our book about that it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it's a really important. We think it's a very important tool that First Nations want. Some First Nations want. And that all First Nations should have available to them. It's allowing individual property ownership allows First Nations to expand markets. Right now, if you own land as an individual through some of the Indian Act property rights, your market is limited to the band members, which could be 50 individuals. By embracing individual property ownership, you increase the market available and create all sorts of investment opportunities and wealth generating activities. So we think it's an important part of addressing Indigenous poverty in Canada, but we don't think obviously it's going to be the magic bullet.
Understood. John Kay?
I don't think there's any magic bullet, but in the same way that North Korea and South Korea are different, private property makes a huge difference in people's lives, and there are microcosms for this. Fort Albany, Ontario, is an extraordinary microcosm of this. I went to see a beautiful home in Fort Albany, and it was more beautiful than any of the homes I'd seen. And I said, "Wow, how'd you get permission to build this on the reserve?" The guy built it with his own hands over 2 years, and he said, "See the reserve line? It's over there." The guy built it outside the reserve because that was the only way he was able to build the house he wanted. You go on the reserve, and it is just basically cookie-cutter, 3-bedroom homes provided by the band. In the same way that if you went to a communist country, you'd find cookie-cutter homes because that's what governments and collectives do. On the other side of Fort Albany, I found this great rooming house. The rooms are $135 a night. The guy was making a killing. I stayed there. Again, off the reserve. He could not have built that property on the reserve. So you had flourishing businesses. They were all done off reserve because that was where you could buy the land, you could control the land, you could profit from the land. These people were making money operating businesses in the same way that anyone here in Toronto can do that. But it's very difficult to do on the reserve. And it's not because these people aren't industrious people. We then went to Attawapiskat. I went with this fellow who built this gorgeous house. And, he was shaking his head because in Attawapiskat, a lot of the people got free trailers from De Beers. In the matter of 5 years, or 4 years, between 2009 and 2013, a lot of these trailers are completely unlivable now.
How come?
The people don't own the trailers. They have absolutely no interest in maintaining them. There's no private property right. Why are they going to spend a single cent or any elbow grease in maintaining property they don't own? And that's the same thing in any relationship where you have no stake in the property, you have absolutely no interest in maintaining it. Mold is in the basement, you don't care because you didn't pay for that property. You will get another house if you're connected to band leadership. But this isn't, by the way, an indictment of the people who live in the community. It's
the system.
It's a part of human nature. If you don't have a property interest in something, you're not going to take care of it.
My mother and her twin sister have a very nice house in reserve that they built themselves with a certificate of possession.
Where they don't own the land.
Up in the Pas, Manitoba. They don't own the land. And yet still, it's a very nice house. There's no mold in the basement.
Is it problematic that they don't own the land?
Not for them, no. As far as they're concerned, I think they've made an investment in the physical infrastructure, and the market for their house is very small, but they'll sell it when the time comes. So I just mean that is a story, but it's not the story, and it's not a true story.
Don't you want to give them the same freedom that you and I have here in Toronto? To buy and sell, lease, mortgage a property, the same right that every other Canadian enjoys. Don't you think they deserve that right?
I'm not in the business of giving people rights.
But we're talking about that in the show.
I do believe that people should be able to choose the kinds of lives that they want, and for us to make those decisions for them is, I think, politically untenable.
Is it paternalizing to say the life you deserve is one where your freedoms are restricted?
No, I think it's patronizing for you to tell First Nations communities what they need to do, and to say that my mother's house is mold in the basement.
This isn't the Indian Act.
It's
1876 Indian Act, so we're talking about something that's encoded in Canadian law, not something that these people chose themselves.
Again, I'm saying some communities this might be helpful for them. It's just I think it's wrong to focus on it. It's fetishistic to focus on property in this way.
It's the most basic aspect of Western civilization. It's why we're rich. So why is it wrong to focus on the thing that made Western countries rich?
I don't know that it is, in fact, what made Western civilization rich, but I think that First Nations cultures think of themselves as having been very rich cultures before the arrival of Europeans and without these kinds of notions of private property. And I think it denigrates First Nations to say that they're somehow less advanced because they may not have shared these notions.
Let me get the out-of-towners into this. Tobold first, and then Christopher. Can I have you weigh in on this, please? Tobold, you first.
Well, it's the private property model is interesting because it really doesn't get us out of the Indian Act at all. The private property models that are out there all deal with bans and reserves, and bans and reserves are constructions that are entrenched in the Indian Act. If you want to permit or allow Indigenous communities to take up a private property rights regime, then you have to allow them to do it as nations over their traditional territories. If you restrict it arbitrarily to reserves, you're just reinforcing the Indian Act. The other thing to say about it is that Canada's obligation right now is to assist these communities in building up capacities. It's not to open another hallway in the labyrinth of colonialism and act as if we're giving them some great options. These communities, when under duress, under the duress of colonialism and the legacy of residential school systems and the poverty, just opening them up to the markets, domestic markets and global markets, without also allowing them to have legitimate and supported self-government regimes is a recipe for disaster. So this is why the Royal Commission observed that if you're going to have any economic changes, any changes to the economic structures of Indigenous communities, they have to be tied to changes in governance structures. So if you're going to get rid of the property restriction and investment restrictions on reserves or the traditional lands, you have to get rid of the governance restrictions as well, so that these communities can actually make a real choice about whether they want to pursue private property over their lands.
Can I ask you about you here?
Sure.
Here's what I hear. You know, I'm out there, I go to speeches, I talk to people, I see stuff, and here's what I hear them say about you. Man, is she a good campaigner. She walks into a room, she lights it up, she is impressive, she's a great speaker, she points to people in the audience, she's not a slave to her text, she really talks the speech as opposed to, reads it off the page. However, I also hear, boy, she can be aggressive, and she can be tough in not necessarily a good way. And I wonder if you would speak to those who worry that you are too, I mean, everything's obviously in contrast too. Are you too aggressive compared to people who've traditionally had this job?
I'm going to guess and say that the people who told you the first thing didn't tell you the second, number one. And it's in their best interest to suggest either one of them, right? So to be fair, let me give you an example that I had a big speech just recently. And in that audience of, I will call it the Toronto blue chip crowd, and right in the middle of it, at my guest table was Buzz Hargrove sitting with me as a guest. And in the audience with his whole table was Ken Lowenza from the CAW. And I'm going to just acknowledge that my history has been to work with everyone to find a solution. And after that speech was over, Ken Lowenza went and grabbed that microphone. I panicked because you just don't know what he's going to do, honestly. And he said, I support her. I believe what she says because I lived it. And he said, when I was first elected, and he knew me then, he knew me before I was elected, I'm that same person. I acknowledge that I'm very upfront with people, but I actually believe it's what they want right now. That's why I said, maybe I wouldn't have been the right one in 2003. It needed to be Dalton McGuinty. But right now, there's a sense that they don't know what's coming out next. We've had some big issues at Queen's Park that people feel like we're not telling them the story. And all I'm saying is, in Windsor for 16 years, what worked was me just being me, being upfront with people, trying to be honest, trying to be upfront about the challenge, and then actually bringing them in to help. So during the height of the recession, when I had to work with Buzz Hargrove, Ken Lowenza, in the most troubling of our economic times, they worked with us. So in my speech to the blue chip crowd, I said, no, it's not one and two, it's three. It's labor, business, and government. The three of us, we can make it happen. And that's been my history, and I was grateful that they were there to help.
But are you the person, one of the things I hear is that, and you said it yourself in this interview, whoever leads the Liberal Party next has got to reach across the floor and get at least one of the other two parties to sign on to whatever you want to negotiate, or else the government's dead.
Right.
I don't hear many people saying, boy, Sandra Pupatello is really the candidate who's the make us all feel good, come together, unifying, sing Kumbaya around the fireplace kind of person. She is the attack dog because she had all those years in opposition where she sharpened her teeth.
Well, you know what I do have that's really important right now? 8 years in opposition. And you know what that does? It teaches you why a government should respect the opposition. So if anybody's going to be the leader right now, you want someone who understands that the people over there actually have good ideas, and you need to incorporate them. So,
and you would.
Unlike, I had lots of ideas when I was in opposition, and you know what? To Harris's credit, he even took some, and I appreciated that. But when you're in a minority house, you have to, because the public brought us this house, and we had better use it. Unlike Harper, if you recall the federal minority government, everyone said he governed like he had a majority, and he did. But the difference was their opposition parties were completely in disarray and couldn't mount an effective campaign against them. That is not the case in Ontario. 2 opposition parties, they've been there for 8 years, they're very organized, they're very strong, and the government has to work with them. And I actually believe that I hope is going to be the tone that I can bring that will be different. That the last year we've operated as if we're a majority without the levers of a majority government.
What people seem to be saying to me is, if you're looking for a coming together candidate, you probably want the person who took conflict resolution at Harvard, which is Kathleen Wynne, as opposed to you, who's more of a, if I can put it this way, brass knuckles, Windsor, Ontario, tough-headed politician.
You know what? I'm gonna just listen to Ken Lowenza and Buzz Hargrove and ask, why would they support me? They're as tough as it gets when it comes to the CAW and bargaining. They've got a great history and success on their side. Why would they support me unless they believe that we're all in it for the right reasons and that I can do this job? They've got a lot at stake here in our election, and I know they're watching very carefully, and they would never say that lightly. So I'm going to leave it to others to have to decide.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, 16 years of experience in government and in opposition is exactly what you need to have right now.
Let me see if I can suss you out on this. Sandra Pupatello, are you back come hell or high water?
Well, I sure hope so. I'm back, and I've said that everywhere I go.
But if you don't win, are you running in the next election anyway?
Well, what I have said is I'm going to leave it to my Liberal Party to decide how they could make best use of me, because I hope that they will want to, but our nomination process is such that if I run in a by-election, the leader's going to call it. I'm going to sort of pick where I might run, right? If I'm not the leader, I don't have the same levers to say, oh, I think I'll just go run, because there isn't a seat available right now. There would be if you're the leader, a little tougher if you're not. So I need to leave it to my party to participate in that decision on what else are you going to do with Sandra. I will tell you, I'm in this to win. I'm in this to win, not just in this short term as leader, to extend this term as long as possible, to bring in a throne speech, a budget. In the first couple of months, people are going to take this intake of breath. Wow, this is a different government. And they need to see that right now. I hear that. I've been hearing that on the outside for a while, Steve. So I intend to do that. Okay. And I actually believe that once we get on that road, the 2 opposition parties are not going to want an election. But I'll tell you, the way Hudak's been talking lately, if he sends us out there unwillingly, I'm going to take him on. I'm going to go after red Tory votes. I'm going after the NDP vote. The NDP wants someone to fight for them, and I will. They know I will. People like Ken Lowenza will tell them that I will. And red Tories, I know now what they're saying to me. They're helping me in my leadership. So I know that they believe that we can do this, and I believe it too.
Are you champing at the bits to go to the polls, though?
Actually, what I am chomping at the bit is to bring in a cabinet that people are going to say, wow, these are the priorities that we need to see. Accountability measures that we've not seen for a while, I want to bring those into government. The things that I learned while I was out of government and the perspective, I want to bring that into the cabinet table as well. I'm excited about it. I actually believe that if we talk about jobs in the economy, no other 2 parties will want an election, and I certainly am not planning to go into one.
Let's put into perspective some of what you do. If we can control them, let's bring these first couple of graphics up. The number of public hospitals in the province of Ontario is 149. They spend $23.4 billion, but 16 hospitals comprise about half of that expenditure. And here's the list. We're not quite Dave Letterman here, so we're not going to do a top 10. We're going to do a top 8. Bob Bell, there's yours. Number 1, University Health Network. We go down from Hamilton, Ottawa, London. There's Sunnybrook. Barry, that's yours. Trillium Health Centre, Hospital for Sick Kids, Mary Jo, and the other Bob, there's St. Mike's Hospital there. So we've got 4 of the top 8 hospitals in the province represented here today. And I want to start, let's just go around and have you tell us very briefly what makes your hospital distinctive.
Well, Hospital for Sick Children's been around for a long time, 1875. It's distinctive in that it's the largest pediatric academic center in Canada. It's distinctive because it's had a research enterprise for over 60 years. So the underpinning of the way we do what we do is really anchored in research. And incredibly unique in that we are focused on, and have been for a very long time, family-centered care. So the child and family at the center.
Gotcha. Bob Howard, St. Mike's.
St. Mike's has become an academic hospital with emphasis on research and education, but we've still, from a patient care point of view, made a priority those who are less fortunate, disadvantaged. Added to that, a tertiary care focus on critical care and some specialty programs.
Bob Bell.
Steve, UHN goes back to the War of 1812, actually, formed just after that. We're 4 hospitals: Princess Margaret Hospital, Toronto General, Toronto Western, and Toronto Rehab, the most recent member of the UHN family. In addition, as you've pointed out, to being the hospital with the largest budget, looking after the most acute inpatients and rehab patients in the province, we're also proud to be Canada's most research-intensive hospital. So our budget includes about $300 million a year in research expenditures. And as is the case with Sick Kids and our other partner hospitals around the table here, we're very proud to be part of the Ontario Research Hospital enterprise community that's really trying to bring the best new information from our labs into practice so that we can benefit not only patient care, also the cost effectiveness of patient care.
Barry, Sunnybrook.
There's been quite an evolution. We are a very robust academic health sciences center, and we'd be somewhat differentiated by our very significant focus around critical injury and illness. Sunnybrook was the first trauma center in Canada. It's the largest trauma and burn center in the country. And we're very much focused on other areas of critical illness, including cancer, image-guided heart and stroke care, as well as high-risk mothers and babies.
One of the things we also hear is that hospitals are places you don't want to go if you don't have to go there. There's MRSA, superbugs, all sorts of bad things that can happen to you in the hospital, unanticipated. So if you don't have to have surgery there, better that you don't. Isn't that right?
So I would say that's true. If there's a way to do the surgery without an admission to a hospital bed, then you probably should. And just to add to it, we've moved a long way. St. Michael's has never had fewer beds than it has today and never cared for more patients than it does today. So how's that possible? Well, the answer is technology and new models of care have resulted in just totally different types of practice. So a lot of the surgery we do now is outpatient surgery. You can have your gallbladder removed now and not be admitted to a bed. So, you know, it used to be a week in hospital and 3 months of sore abdomen, sore tummy afterwards. Now you don't get admitted and often back to work in weeks. So that's technology and new methods of doing surgery. So we're all there. We're all going there as fast as we can. Some of them initially are more expensive than the traditional models, but we find ways to make them more cost effective and move on because they're better for the patient.
That dovetails to my next question, which is if we can do more procedures outside of big, expensive hospital settings, can we get away with giving you guys less money?
So, Steve, I'm going to start off by challenging that we're expensive. Against what? Ontario Hospital's efficiency, the work that we've done towards streamlining care that we've discussed here today actually results in a per capita cost of hospital care to Ontarian citizens that's $200 less than the average Canadian cost. That's about a $4 billion premium to the taxpayer of Ontario. We certainly have further to go. We've talked about the fact that not every patient that's in hospital perhaps needs to be there. We need to improve our community resources to accept those patients to a high standard of care in the community. But certainly, we'd suggest that Ontario hospitals are working hard to make our care more cost effective, and that's showing up.
Okay, but
There's evidence of
that having been said, let's take your numbers at face value. That having been said, it's presumably cheaper to do I'm going to assume it's going to be cheaper to do a hernia at Shouldice than it is to do it on University Avenue. Is that right?
Steve, people stay overnight at Shouldice. They spend a couple of days admitted to hospital when they get their hernia done at Shouldice. They don't do that when they come into UHN, St. Mike's, or Sunnybrook for a hernia repair. They go home the same day.
So put the stereotypes out of my head. It ain't necessarily so.
I think you got to dig under the surface a little bit to see some of the changes that are happening in the Ontario hospital system.
Let's set the table with the following. Howard Gardner is a Harvard psychologist who wrote in Foreign Policy magazine a couple of years ago the following, and I want to read this to get our discussion started. With the global quest for long-term competitiveness assuming new urgency, education is on everyone's front burner. Societies are looking for ways to make quantum leaps in the speed and efficiency of learning. So long as we insist on teaching all students the same subjects in the same way, progress will be incremental. But now, for the first time, it is possible to individualize education, to teach each person what he or she needs and wants to know in ways that are most comfortable and most efficient, producing a qualitative spurt in educational effectiveness. Wherever and whenever personalized education takes hold, many more individuals will be well educated because they will have learned in ways that suit them best. Okay, Carol Tomlinson, let me bring you in first here down in Virginia. Are we making strides in learning how to teach individuals rather than large cohorts? Are we making adequate progress sufficiently?
Well, your question, then your rephrase question, probably would elicit two different answers from me. I think we've made progress in teachers' awareness of student differences. It's not that people weren't aware of that in the past, it's just that the differences have become so much broader and so much more evident in most classrooms. And I meet very few teachers who aren't aware of the student differences. They understand that different kids respond to the same lesson in very different ways, that they enter at different points, that their cultures matter. If the question is, we made adequate progress, no, I don't think we're close yet. I think we're at a very early stage for a variety of reasons, with great possibilities ahead of us, but with a lot of distance yet to go.
Howard Gardner, the Harvard psychologist who we quoted at the top of the program, is thought to be one of the biggest champions in the world of so-called multiple intelligences. Help us out. What does that mean?
Well, Howard Gardner's original thesis went against the old style of IQ testing, which was quite limited when you think about the way it was managed, and still is in some cases, unfortunately. This kind of psychometric testing where all you're doing really is testing a very limited bandwidth of someone's understanding, so mathematical and maybe visual spatial skills. Most IQ tests will have those in them. Else. What he decided to do was look at the multiple intelligence, or things like emotional intelligence, things like interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligences, things that people are equipped with which weren't tested by the IQ tests. I think he now has a number, I think it's number 9 now, 9 different intelligences that he's identified, and each of them we all have, according to his theory, in smaller or larger numbers, and these are also context bound. So they will come out in various different situations depending on what you find yourself in. And it's actually quite an interesting theory, because what it does is it differentiates between everybody. There is no pigeonholing us into, you know, he's a visual learner or she's an auditory learner. We are now all multiple intelligence people.
Let's get Ken Robinson on this again, shall we? One more clip from Sir Ken Robinson. Roll tape, please, on this issue.
Every education system on Earth has the same hierarchy of subjects. Everyone, doesn't matter where you go. You think it would be otherwise, but it isn't. At the top are mathematics and languages, then the humanities, and at the bottom are the arts, everywhere on Earth. There isn't an education system on the planet that teaches dance every day to children the way we teach them mathematics. Why? Why not? I think this is rather important. I think maths is very important, but so is dance. If you think of it, the whole system of public education around the world is a protracted process of university entrance. And the consequence is that many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. And I think we can't afford to go on that way.
Christina, were you a math teacher once upon a time?
I am. I still am.
Okay.
Always be a math teacher, Steve.
Okay. Does math equal dance?
Well, I think what Sir Ken's point is that sometimes kids need to do different kinds of things to learn, be it math, science, English. I have a colleague who needs to pace in order to think deeply about things, and there are some students that need to be able to move and need to use movement in order to learn, and other students who need to be able to draw. And it's not so much about the hierarchy of the subjects as it is about providing opportunities for kids to leverage their own internal preferences to learn different kinds of concepts.
Here's an excerpt that I want to read from a blog post by a guy who teaches grade 6 here in the province of Ontario. His name is Rick McCleary, showing how different types of students worked on a project, and it follows a Twitter exchange between his class and the Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield, who's up in space right now, and in fact, as odd as this sounds, dropped the ceremonial opening puck at the Maple Leafs home opener the other night from space. It was actually pretty cool how they pulled that off. But anyway, here we go. Here's what Rick has to say. More literary students have been writing an astronaut's blog about their travels to one of the moons of Jupiter. Arts-oriented students have created scale models of the International Space Station or a detailed section of Mars. Other learners chose to do a model of what they think the first colony on the surface of the moon would look using computer programs such as Google SketchUp or even Minecraft. Students whose passion is in health and fitness created activity centers where visitors learn about astronaut food, practice the astronaut jump and the moonwalk, compare their weights, and consider how Olympic records would be different if they were achieved on different planets. More drama-oriented students presented information in front of a green screen, so it looks like they're actually visiting another planet during the presentation. Steve, is the idea behind differentiated learning that each student does something which can't be compared to what any other student is doing?
I think so, yeah. I think if we're trying to get kids to be creative, then we've got to ask them to each play to their own strengths, and they will create things that are different to everyone else. This is why, you know, Sophie's picture is totally different to William's picture, and they use different techniques, and it means different things to them. I think fun is the essence of that. Without fun, kids tend to switch off. This is education by stealth. What we've got to do is we've got to start injecting these elements of fun and enjoyment in to what would otherwise be a dull lesson about science. And I think that's a classic example of that.
Remember all the promise of the Arab Spring? Citizens had a voice and democracy would flourish. But alas, that is not what has been delivered in parts of the Middle East and North Africa, and of course in Syria in particular. Our next guest has spent 3 decades covering the region, and he joins us now for his perspective. Here's Robert Fisk, Middle East correspondent at The Independent, and we're very happy to have you in this studio again.
Happy to be here, yeah.
You were here a long time ago.
It feels like it.
You're giving a lecture called Arab Awakening, But Are We Hearing the Truth? And I wonder if we can start by having you tell us what truth are you concerned that we are not hearing about this Arab awakening?
Well, first of all, it is an Arab awakening. It's not an Arab Spring. Secondly,
what's the difference?
Because Arab Spring is a cliche. Sort of thing gets invented in Washington, not in Ottawa, of course. And I use the word Arab Awakening because this was the title of George Antonius's book in 1938, where he first revealed the factual details of the Arab Revolution in 1916, when the Arabs agreed to fight on behalf of the Allies against the Ottoman Turks. And I think it is an intellectual awakening as well as being a form of revolution. Anyway, spring became bloody summer in other places like Syria. So there's another good reason for avoiding, dates, and autumn became bloody, winter became bloody. The truth you're not hearing, I think it's really that we pretended, we the West, to pretend that this is all about democracy. I don't think it ever was. I think it's about dignity, and I think it's about justice. But I never saw posters or banners saying, give us democracy. They said, down with the regime. Get rid of Mubarak, get rid of Ben Ali. But they never said, give us democracy. And I think the reason was, and this is what we forget, that most of these dictators whom they were getting rid of have been supported by us. And we say that we're Democrats. So I think many Arabs are very suspicious of when the Western powers come and offer them democracy, when those same Western powers have spent decades propping up the dictators who've been repressing them.
Can you give us a sense about what kind of dignity and justice they would like to see that they have not been experiencing?
Well, I think they want dignity in the sense that their dictators, usually propped up by us, all of them at some stage, Saddam used to be our friend, Hafez al-Assad was, So was Gaddafi at one point. Mr. Blair actually kissed him on both cheeks. I think that all these dictators believed that they owned their own countries, that they actually possessed the real estate. And in many ways, what the people, I mean, I watched the Egyptian revolution from beginning to end. What the people of Egypt were saying was, this country belongs to us, it does not belong to that 84-year-old fool over there.
And therefore what, though? It belongs to us, and therefore what?
Therefore, we have a right to decide how we live our lives, what the future of our country should be.
But that's
albeit that
democracy,
well, is it? Is it really democracy?
Self-determination for people? We get the right to decide how we'll be governed, what form of government?
It's not quite what the Greeks were saying about democracy, and they did invent the word, Steve.
Okay.
No, what they're looking for, what Arabs have looked for, is the freedom to speak, which is not necessarily the same as democracy. The freedom to say, our dictator is a corrupt old man, get rid of him, or a corrupt young man, in the case of other countries we can think of, like Syria. And I think what they've demanded is an end to being humiliated. Humiliated by the West, humiliated by their dictators, who did all the humiliation for the West. Peace treaties which they may or may not believe in. In many of them, in the case, they don't believe in the peace treaty with Israel, although they're not going to break it because for all kinds of financial reasons they can't do that, and also because of common sense. But I think that most Arabs whom I've come across, including Syria, and I've been on both sides of the front line. I've been with government troops, I've been on the other side. I think that in Syria, for example, even those people who are trying to crush the revolution, I'm talking about Assad, they say Syria will never be the same again. The old Syria is gone. We all know that now. And I think this came about because people not just use technology. We've spent too much time talking about how wonderful Twitter was and YouTubes and YTubes and so on. I think they were better educated. I think they traveled abroad. When I first went to Egypt, I hardly met anyone except the elite who'd ever been outside Egypt, unless they'd been to the Hajj and Mecca. And now they travel abroad, they see foreign television programs, they watch Al Jazeera, and they see that their country doesn't have to be the midden of corruption that it was for so many decades.
Is the Middle East worse off now than when we last spoke 15 years ago?
I suspect we're better off. I mean, Al-Qaeda has played out. It does not have a popular role in Egypt, Jordan, Syria. There may be groupuscules, but not more. We certainly had the explosion. I thought that explosion was going to happen in the Middle East. It happened in, as we know, New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington. But I think we all felt in the Middle East something bad was going to happen. We saw the absolute fury of the Arab Muslim people against the West for what they felt was an oppression against them, and not just military, although that was sure enough, but cultural, religious, you name it. And that hasn't necessarily got better. We haven't actually had an improvement. But I think the real problems now, which were not so much then, although it was then, is Palestine, Palestine, Palestine. The same Prime Minister, Netanyahu, as when I was talking before. But I think that we're further away than ever from seeing a Palestinian state. I go to Israel and the West Bank. I don't think there's a room anymore. There's too many Jewish colonies in the West Bank for there practically, physically to be a Palestinian state. So I put quotation marks around Palestine, but I always say, unless there is a Palestinian state, there will not be a real peace between the Arabs and Israel. And that, apart from Iran, which is another kettle of fish for another time, that is something we're going to be watching over the coming year.
That is the Agenda's Week in Review, and you can see all of those programs in their entirety on our website, theagenda.tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, and on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/theagenda.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.